Hi friends, welcome to History Taking in Cardiovascular System. I'm Dr. K. Haynes Raja, doing my DM Residency Cardiology from Christian Medical College, Vellore. So in this module, I'd like to tell about the proforma, basic history taking proforma, what are the history which are important in cardiovascular system, and what are the differential diagnoses which you can consider by asking those history. Basically, whenever you ask certain questions to your patient, you should know what is the clinical significance in asking that point. Okay, for example, the duration of dyspnea can tell you these are the probable diagnoses. The onset of dyspnea can tell you these are the probable diagnoses. The onset of chest pain can tell you these are the probable diagnoses. So basically, with history, from each point you ask the patient, each answer you get from the patient, you can understand that the probable etiology or probable differential diagnosis are these. Okay, so that is the most important thing. And during the last presentation, we have seen a lot of case scenarios which would have highlighted the importance of history taking. With history only, we can identify and come to a probable conclusion or probable differential diagnosis or probable diagnosis sometimes. Okay, so ischemic heart disease, the diagnosis can be arrived by this simple history taking and examination. So that is the importance of history taking. And here I would like to highlight the proforma, what are the points which are very important to be asked in your proforma and the clinical relevance as well. Okay, so as usual, name, age, sex, occupation and address. These are the 5 points which should be asked first. Name for the identification, age for age-wise incidence of diseases, and male or female. Yes, some diseases are common in males, some diseases are common in females. Yes, for example, your Raynaud's is common in females. Raynaud's, this is the Raynaud's picture. Okay, there will be vasospasm that will lead to pale face of pallor. There will be decreased flow to the distal arterial blood. That will lead to pale face. Then there will be venodilation producing cyanosis. Then there will be reperfusion, which will lead to redness. Okay, these are the 3 phases of your Raynaud's. Okay, and that is more common in females. Whereas there is condition of erythromelalgia, which are more common in males. Okay, and occupation related disorders. Yes, this Raynaud's can occur in persons who are using vibrating tools or typewriting more or piano players. Okay, those people can develop this Raynaud's as well. Okay, whereas basically Raynaud's can occur as a primary etiology and secondary. The most common etiology for Raynaud's will be your systemic sclerosis. Okay, scleroderma, where in 80 to 90% of the patients, Raynaud's will be the presenting symptom. Okay, based on the address, you can think of certain illness as well. Okay, and the presenting complaints, the golden rule is it should always be presented in chronological order. For example, a patient having cough for 15 days, fever for 1 month, okay, and dyspnea for 2 months, you should present like dyspnea for the past 2 months duration, okay, and fever for past 1 month duration, and cough for 2 weeks duration. So this is how the order should be. Okay, from the longest, the 1 month, the 2 months, then 1 month, then 2 weeks. Okay, it should be always in a chronological order. That is the golden point to be remembered. Okay, so coming to the history of presenting illness, what are the cardinal symptoms we discussed already? We discussed what are the cardinal symptoms. Yes. So number 1, chest pain. Number 2, dyspnea. Number 3, palpitation. Number 4, syncope. Number 5, edema. So these are the cardinal symptoms which should be asked in any patient in cardiovascular system, right? So the first symptom, chest pain. So what are the characteristic things which you should be discussing under chest pain? It is the mnemonic Socrates. Okay, so site, onset, character, radiation, okay, exacerbating, associated features, timing, exacerbating or relieving factors, and severity. Okay, S for site, O for onset, C for character, R for radiation, A for associated features, T for timing, E for exacerbating or relieving factors, and S for severity. Okay, so based on this, what are the conclusions we can come? So this is a very important table. So the differential diagnosis can be considered for chest pain include angina, myocardial infarction, aortic dissection, pericarditis, and esophageal pain. So anginal pain, site will be retrosternal. Even myocardial infarction, both share a lot of points. But thing is, this myocardial infarction can occur suddenly, and it will be continuing irrespective of whether you take rest or you are continuing to move. Okay, so that is a very most important differential diagnosis for an angina. MI will be an angina. and the severity is very very severe. There will be severe pain. Okay. So apart from that, retrosternal or back pain can also be there in aortic dissection. In a pericarditis pain is usually be left sided. Okay, so site retrosternal in angina and myocardial infarction, retrosternal or back pain in aortic dissection, left sided pain in pericarditis, and even esophageal pain. The esophagus in the mediastinum, so it can also cause a retrosternal pain. So onset is usually sudden onset, very sudden onset in two conditions. One is a myocardial infarction and aortic dissection. Suddenly the aorta gets torn. Okay, myocardial infarction, suddenly the plaque ruptures and causes a clot, and that will lead to pain. Whereas angina, it will be usually on exertion, so it takes some time for the onset. Okay, pericarditis pain usually will be gradual, and esophageal pain is usually gradual. Sometimes esophageal spasm can produce sudden pain onset. Okay. So character is constricting and heavy. Both angina and myocardial infarction causes constricting or heavy type of pain. Whereas tearing or ripping and migrating pain can be seen in aortic dissection. As the tearing goes further down, my pain also will start from the chest and will go down further. Okay, as the tearing continues. Okay, so that is the aortic dissection pain. Tearing, ripping or migrating pain, and stabbing, sharp stabbing pain is seen in pericarditis, and burning pain can be seen in esophageal pain. Okay, and radiation can be to arm, neck, jaw or epigastrium in both angina and myocardial infarction. Okay, and back or shoulder in aortic dissection. Trapezius ridge or left shoulder, trapezius ridge is a classical point which can be discussed for a pericarditic pain, and esophageal can also pain and also be radiating to back. Associated features: dyspnea in angina, sweating, dyspnea, vomiting, and anger anemia. As discussed already, it is the fear of impending death which can occur in a patient with myocardial infarction. Okay, and focal neurological deficit can occur in aortic dissection. Sweating and syncope can occur. Basically, when the aorta gets torn, the supply, for example, celiac artery is there, superior mesenteric artery is there. If the tearing, impairs the blood supply, then organ can get ischemia. Okay, similarly, the blood supply, your supply vein artery can be damaged. Okay, that can lead to organ ischemia. Your blood flow to the brain can get impaired, especially in ascending aorta dissection. What happens is the blood flow to your brain can get impaired. That can lead to syncope, sometimes permanent neurological deficits. Okay, and in pericarditis, there will be always a flu-like syndrome previously in the previous 2 weeks, or can occur concurrently as well. So fever or flu-like syndrome can be there. Heartburn will be associated in esophageal pain. Okay, so timing of the pain is in angina, it is 2 to 10 minutes. Okay, it will occur in 1 to 2 minutes, starts to occur in 1 to 2 minutes. It lasts for around 2 to 10 minutes, and as soon as the patient takes rest, the pain will be relieved. Okay, whereas myocardial infarction will be continuing and aortic dissection will be continuing. This pericarditis is variable, and esophageal pain predominantly in night time. Okay, and what are the exacerbating factors or relieving factors? Emotion, exertion, cold. Okay, these are the typical triggers for angina: emotion, exertion, and cold. Whereas stress and exercise can precipitate a myocardial infarction. Okay, there are relieving factors for angina: rest or nitrates. Whereas there is no relieving factor unless you recanalize the vessel, reperfuse the vessel, you put a stent or thrombolize the patient, the pain will not be relieved. Okay, and aortic dissection, the be spontaneously can occur, and exercise or exertion can also lead to aortic dissection. Pericarditis, the pericarditis pain, typical exacerbating factors are inspiration, deep inspiration, or coughing. Okay, while the patient's pain will increase, and sitting up and leaning forwards, the pain will decrease. Okay, tell me, what is the abdominal pathology which can get decreased with the sitting and leaning forwards? It is your pancreatitis. Okay, the chest organ problem which can get relieved or decreased by leaning forwards is your pericarditis, whereas your abdomen pathology is your pancreatitis, which gets relieved by sitting and leaning forwards. Okay, and lying flat triggers in an esophageal pain, whereas nitrates can sometimes relieve a pain of esophageal pain. Okay, and severity will be mild in almost all the disorders except for your myocardial infarction and aortic dissection, where there can be severe pain. So based on these Socrates, okay, site, onset, character, radiation, okay, associated features, timing, exacerbating or relieving factors, and severity, you can come to a conclusion whether the pain is an anginal pain or myocardial infarction, aortic dissection, or a pericarditis or an esophageal pain. So what are the common causes of angina? Angina can be due to two important causes. One is a coronary artery disease where the blood flow to the heart is getting impaired, and next important cause is an aortic stenosis. Okay, so coronary artery disease or aortic stenosis. Okay, sometimes can also occur in HOCM, hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy. So for the myocardial infarction to occur, plaque rupture. Okay, plaque rupture is an important etiology for your myocardial infarction. Okay, and pericarditis can be due to post-viral or post-myocardial infarction. The patient can develop pericarditis. Okay, esophageal pain, this can be due to GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, sometimes due to hiatus hernia, sometimes due to esophageal spasm. So these are the common etiologies which can produce this type of pain. Okay, and there are certain important questions which the examiner allow to ask you. What is angina equivalent? So what is angina? We discussed that when a patient is walking, he develops chest pain associated with dyspnea. It starts at around 1 to 2 minutes interval, and then it lasts for around 2 to 10 minutes, and it is settling on its own, or sometimes with nitrate. So this is called angina. So angina equivalent, the patient will not have chest pain, the patient will have only dyspnea. Sometimes the patient will have only sweating. Okay, so these are the symptoms. Sometimes the patient will have only vomiting. So these are the symptoms which occurs instead of chest pain. These are the symptoms which will manifest, which indicates that the patient is having angina. Okay, these are called angina equivalents, and these are common in diabetic patients. Okay, diabetic patients may not have a chest pain but manifest with these other problems. These are the symptoms, but it is equal to an angina. Okay, so what is Prinzmetal angina? Prinzmetal angina is due to coronary vasospasm. Remember, it is due to coronary vasospasm. Okay, it is not an acute coronary syndrome. It is different entity. Prinzmetal angina, it's also called as variant angina. Okay, nocturnal angina can occur in basically angina only at night. This can be due to sometimes the waning of the nitrates effects. Okay, we usually give nitrates at 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. because the patient should not develop a nitrate tolerance. Sometimes what happens is the effect weans off at the night time, that can produce a nocturnal angina. A patient with syphilis can also have a nocturnal angina. Osteal involvement, coronary osteal involvement can also nocturnal angina. Unstable angina is one of the component of acute coronary syndromes. There are three components of acute coronary syndromes as discussed already. One is a STEMI, another is an NSTEMI, and another is an unstable angina. Okay, these are very important conditions. We should be treating aggressively these three conditions. Okay, so now coming to the differential diagnosis, what are the causes of central chest pain? So central chest pain can be due to, again classify and answer, cardiovascular causes, esophageal causes, tracheal causes, mediastinal causes. Cardiovascular, esophageal, tracheal and mediastinal. So cardiovascular causes can be due to myocardial infarction, aortic dissection and pulmonary thromboembolism. Especially massive pulmonary thromboembolism can cause central chest pain. Okay. Whereas peripheral chest pain non-central chest pain can be due to pulmonary embolism. Small pulmonary embolism can lead to pulmonary infarction. Okay, one area of the segment of the lung can get infarcted and that can produce pain. That can also be contributed by pulmonary thromboembolism. So esophageal causes of central chest pain will be rupture and GERD. Tracheal causes tracheitis, inflammation. Mediastinal causes lung cancer, mediastinitis and thymoma. Okay, so these are the causes of central chest pain. Okay, non-central chest pain can be due to pleural chest wall. So pleural causes include infection, malignancy, pneumothorax, pulmonary infarction. Okay, pulmonary infarction, I told, a small emboli which can lodge in the periphery of the lungs and can lead to pulmonary infarction. Pneumothorax is air in the pleural cavity which can occur spontaneously in smokers, sometimes due to trauma. Malignancy, especially mesothelioma and metastasis, can cause a non-central chest pain. And infection, especially pneumonia and TB, can also cause a pleurisy, which can produce a typical pleuritic chest pain. On deep inspiration or the coughing, the patient's pain will be increased. Okay, and chest wall pathologies which can cause non-central chest pain include chronic cough, muscle sprain, Tietz syndrome, it's also called as costochondritis, the costochondral junctional pain, and Bonham's disease, that is due to Coxsackie B virus or rib fracture or shingles, which is caused by your varicella. Okay, it's also called as herpes zoster. Varicella virus, okay, a latent virus can manifest at an older age with shingles, which is also called as herpes zoster, which will be confined to a dermatome. Okay, sometimes vesicles can be there, sometimes cannot be there. So these are the causes of non-central chest pain. Okay, which can be classified into pleural and chest wall pathologies. Coming to the next symptom, it is your dyspnea. Dyspnea, the most important points to be noted. Okay, basically DOPEA. Okay, these are the classical symptoms which you should ask anyway. And pain, it is the Socrates. For dyspnea or any other symptom, DOPEA. It's a duration, onset, progression, exacerbation, relief factors, associated symptoms. DOPEA. Okay, and here there is one other thing called grading of dyspnea. Okay, anything else I am missing? Anything else? Dyspnea, anything else to be asked in cardiovascular system? Yes, there are two things which are very, very important. Remember, never forget, in cardiovascular history taking, these are two important things. Okay, it is your PND and orthopnea, paroxysmal nocturnal dyspnea and orthopnea. Okay, orthopnea is dyspnea on lying down. Paroxysmal nocturnal dyspnea, after the patient sleeps, after around 2 to 5 hours, the patient will suddenly get up with difficulty in breathing. After half an hour, the patient will feel better. Okay, so these are the two important things which you should ask in your dyspnea history, especially in a patient with cardiovascular etiology. What is dyspnea? Basically unexplained awareness of one's own breathing. Okay, so it's a subjective experience of breathing discomfort. Okay, right. So what is the mechanism of orthopnea PND? Basically, the dyspnea will occur in lying supine. One is the fluid redistribution into the lungs. So when a patient is having heart failure, there will be increase in hydrostatic pressure that will cause the edema. So the fluid will get into the interstitial space. Okay, when the patient is ambulant during the day, the edema will be collecting in the legs and in the interstitial space. But when the patient lies down, what happens is the accumulated fluid in the interstitium will enter into the vascular compartment, will go into the right side of the heart, will enter the lungs and produces a breathing difficulty. So this redistribution of fluid from the tissues into the plasma and fluid distributed into the lungs. Okay, also there will be rise in left atrial pressure and fall in your partial pressure of oxygen during sleep due to the decreased sympathetic activity, and also there can be increased venous return to the heart. So these are the factors which can lead to orthopnea. Okay, and PND is the earliest symptom of left ventricular failure. Remember, very, very important point, PND is the earliest symptom of left ventricular failure. Okay, and so what happens in trypopnea? Trypopnea is dyspnea in left lateral or right lateral position that can happen in left ventricular failure. Okay, and what is platypnea? Platypnea is breathlessness on sitting upright that can happen in atrial myxoma, and there is a syndrome called hepatopulmonary syndrome. This platypnea is also called as platypnea orthodeoxia syndrome. Okay, orthodeoxia is decrease in saturation when the patient sits up. Okay, can happen in hepatopulmonary syndrome. The mechanism is complex. I'm not interested in explaining in this presentation. Okay, just know that there is an entity called platypnea. Okay, trypopnea is left or right lateral position. Platypnea is dyspnea in getting up posture. Okay, the patient is better than lying down. Similarly, a patient with pulmonary embolism can feel better with lying down. Why? Because massive pulmonary embolism, the patient will be in shock. Okay, and when the patient gets up, the patient will feel giddy. The patient will feel as if he lost consciousness. So the patient will prefer a lying down posture. Okay, so what are the causes of dyspnea? We can classify into pulmonary and your cardiac. Pulmonary and others like that you can classify. Pulmonary causes include airways, parenchyma, pleural and pulmonary circulation. So airway causes, asthma, COPD, sometimes foreign body can get accumulated causing dyspnea. Parenchymal causes include consolidation, fibrosis, malignancy. Pleural causes include pneumothorax and effusion. Okay, and pulmonary circulation includes pulmonary embolism and pulmonary hypertension. Pulmonary hypertension can also cause dyspnea. Okay, and pulmonary hypertension can cause chest pain also because of the RV strain. Right ventricle will try to push the blood from the right ventricle into the pulmonary artery, whereas in pulmonary hypertension, the pulmonary artery will resist the blood flow from the right ventricle into the pulmonary artery. So what happens is the RV will be, fighting to push the blood, and that causes your chest pain. Okay, and cardiac causes include left ventricle failure, ischemic heart disease, your mitral stenosis, HOCM, that is your hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy, and pericardial effusion. So these are the causes of cardiac causes of dyspnea. Neuromuscular causes include myasthenia gravis and Guillain-Barré syndrome. Chest wall causes include kyphosis and ankylosing spondylitis. Okay, so these are the causes of dyspnea. And what are the non-cardiorespiratory causes of your dyspnea? There are some other causes which I have not mentioned here. Okay, that can be anemia, okay, or acidosis. Okay, That respiration is called Kussmaul respiration. Acidosis causing a respiratory pattern called Kussmaul's respiration. Okay, and obesity. Obesity per se can cause a dyspnea. Okay, so anemia, acidosis, obesity, sometimes psychiatric patients with patient with stress can manifest with the hyperventilation, so they will just hyperventilate and present to the casualty. Okay, so based on the onset, how can we classify dyspnea? So dyspnea occurring within minutes or hours to days, weeks to months, or months to years. So minutes, sudden onset, acute onset dyspnea can be due to pneumothorax, acute left ventricular failure, and inhaled foreign body and pulmonary embolism. Okay, especially massive pulmonary embolism. Okay, and hours to days can be due to asthma, COPD, or pneumonia. Weeks to months, anemia and pleural effusion, and months to years can be due to tuberculosis or pulmonary fibrosis or interstitial lung diseases. Okay, so where can you hear the velcro crackles? That is in interstitial lung diseases. Okay, what are the male predominant, the male exclusive lung disease? It is your Langerhans cell histiocytosis. What is the female exclusive lung disease? It is your lymphangioliomyomatosis. Okay, just I am talking lateral points so that just to recall whatever things which we have discussed already. So dyspnea in minutes can be due to pneumothorax, acute LV failure, it's also called as acute pulmonary edema, or inhaled foreign body, or pulmonary embolism, especially massive pulmonary embolism. So it is hours to days, it can be due to asthma, COPD exacerbation, or pneumonia. Weeks to months, it is anemia and pleural effusion. Months to years, it can be tuberculosis or ILD, interstitial lung diseases. Based on the associated features, you can think of differential diagnosis. So dyspnea plus no chest pain can be due to metabolic acidosis, hypolemia shock, pneumothorax, or pulmonary embolism. Okay, so dyspnea with pleuritic chest pain, once again these two will come here also. Pneumothorax and pulmonary embolism can cause pleuritic chest pain also, and pneumonia and rib fracture also can cause pleuritic chest pain. Okay, sometimes dyspnea with central chest pain can be due to massive pulmonary embolism and acute pulmonary edema. V-Zarkov, dyspnea with V-Zarkov can be due to asthma, PND, or your COPD. Okay, the classical differentiating features, the differential diagnosis for a PND will be in your nocturnal asthma. Okay, both can cause V's. This is a cardiac V's, and that is your pulmonary V's. Okay, and both can occur at night time with cough. Alright, so having said about dyspnea, having discussed about the causes of dyspnea, next we are going to discuss about the classification of dyspnea. How do you grade a dyspnea? Okay, so there are two classifications. One is an NYHA classification. It is applied for CVS. Okay, whenever you present a CVS case, you should discuss this NYHA classification. Okay, class 1, there is no limitation. Class 2 is slight limitation of physical activity. Class 3 is marked limitation of physical activity. Symptoms at rest. That's all. These things you should remember. Rest all things is not very important. Remember, class 1 is no limitation. Class 2 is slight limitation. Class 3 is marked limitation. Class 4 is symptoms of heart failure at rest. Okay, so these are the NYHA classification, and I would like to highlight on the MRC classification, medical research classification as well. Okay, so number 1 is grade 1, that is class 1, 2, 3, 4. This is grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Grade 1 is not troubled by breathlessness, okay, except on strenuous exercise. Grade 2 is when hurrying on the level or walking up the slight uphill. Okay, so hurrying on the level ground, not normal walking, there is no dyspnea. When hurrying, there will be dyspnea. Number 3 is walk slower than most of the people on the level. Okay, so that is because the patient's exercise tolerance has come down, because the grading of his dyspnea is severe. And grade 4 stops for breath after walking about 100 yards. Okay, and grades 5, 2 breathlessness to leave the house. Okay, or breathlessness when undressing. Okay, these are the MRC, that is a Medical Research Council classification of dyspnea, which we will use for a RS case presentation. Okay, so coming to the next most important symptom, it is the palpitation. What is palpitation? An unexplained, unexpected awareness of the heart beating in the chest. Okay, people used to describe like thumping. Okay, thumping, pounding, fluttering. So these are the terminologies the patients will use for describing a palpitation. Suddenly they will feel like the heart missed a beat. Okay, so this heart missing a beat can occur with premature complexes, atrial or ventricular premature complexes. What happens is, suddenly a premature complex will come. The ventricle, instead of pumping in the normal regular interval, suddenly a premature complex will come, and the next contraction will take some longer duration. So in that time, the filling will be more into the ventricle. So it will forcefully contract, and that can lead to a feeling of misfeed or palpitation. Okay, that happens with atrial or ventricular premature complex. And palpitation can be paroxysmal, suddenly occurring. Basically, this supraventricular tachycardia, PSVT, they will call paroxysmal supraventricular tachycardia, especially supraventricular tachycardia occur in younger age group with no previous comorbidities, no coronary artery disease. So that we call as PSVT, and adenosine is the treatment of choice, and that occur with sudden onset and sudden offset. Whereas sinus tachycardia, when you are exertion, well, when you are going for walking or running, that time the palpitation onset is slow onset and slow offset. Slowly it increases and slowly it decreases. That is your classical feature of sinus tachycardia. Okay, and sudden offset is classical of your supraventricular tachycardia, and it can be regular or irregular. Okay, so irregular palpitation can occur atrial fibrillation. Okay, and what brought on by exertion? Yes, it is possible. There are a lot of conditions can cause exertional palpitation, especially in AST, atrial septal defect. Okay, and mitral stenosis can also cause like that. Okay, sometimes caffeine or sympathomimetics can cause palpitation. Okay, and what are the exacerbating and relieving factors? Once again, sometimes the palpitation can get relieved by rest. Okay, and associated features: palpitation with sweating, palpitation with dyspnea. Okay, so these are the associated features which can help in identifying the etiology. Okay, so what are the common causes of palpitation? Can be due to cardiovascular causes and other causes. Okay, so cardiovascular causes can be premature atrial or ventricular contractions, that is your premature atrial complex or ventricular complex, SVT or ventricular arrhythmias, supraventricular or ventricular arrhythmias, mitral valve prolapse, aortic insufficiency, atrial myxoma, and myocarditis. Okay, other causes include your hyperdynamic circulatory states. What are the hyperdynamic circulatory states? Okay, as soon as you hear this word, okay, as soon as you hear the word palpitation, you should remember hyperdynamic circulatory states. Okay, so anemia, thyrotoxicosis, okay, and beriberi, okay, then Paget's disease. Okay, so these are the common conditions which can cause your hyperdynamic circulation. Okay, and endocrine causes include thyrotoxicosis and pheochromocytoma. Ethanol consumption can also cause palpitation. Read what is holiday heart syndrome. This is a homework for you. What is holiday heart syndrome? Okay, yeah. Next, the most important symptom is syncope, that is also called as a loss of consciousness. What happens is there is transient self-limited loss of consciousness due to acute global impairment of cerebral blood flow. This is the definition. Okay, so transient, it occurs transient, okay, self-limited, okay, loss of consciousness, okay, due to acute global impairment of cerebral blood flow. Acute global impairment of cerebral blood flow. Okay, duration of syncope, onset, how many episodes per day, what is the recovery time, and associated features and time of last episode. Okay, so these are the important features to be asked. What are the types of syncope? One is called a neurally mediated syncope. Okay, neurally mediated syncope, which is also called as vasovagal. It is very common. Okay, like patients, students standing in prayer for longer duration suddenly collapsing can be due to your vasovagal syncope. Okay, then orthostatic hypotension. Orthostatic hypotension can be caused by autonomic neuropathies, sometimes with diabetes as well. Okay, and third is your cardiac syncope. Okay, cardiac syncope. Okay, what happens is when you suddenly stand, the orthostatic hypotension, I have just to put some words to you. When the patient or anyone suddenly stands, what happens? There will be pooling of blood, around 500 to 1000 ml will be pooling into the extremities, okay, in the legs. Okay, and if a patient is having already LV function failure, then the patient will not be able to compensate. Actually, what happens is when you stand, the heart rate will increase, the BP will try to improve, okay, and the response should happen. Okay, that can be impaired, especially in patients with autonomic neuropathy. All right. So, what are the cardiovascular causes of syncope? Cardiovascular causes of syncope can be arrhythmias, okay, and structural heart diseases. So, what are the arrhythmias? Can be due to SA node dysfunction or AV node dysfunction. There can be this we call sinus arrest or sick sinus syndrome. So, the sinus node is sick. Okay, the sick sinus syndrome, what happens is the atrium will not, the SA node will not generate impulses properly. So, there can be sudden pause, long pause. So, the patient can go for a syncope. Okay, and AV dysfunction, AV node dysfunction can lead to heart blocks, complete heart block or 2:1 AV block like that. And ventricular tachycardias can also cause syncope. Structural heart disease can be due to valvular heart disease, myocardial especially the triad. You remember in aortic stenosis, exertional angina, dyspnea, and syncope. Myocardial ischemia, especially in inferior or myocardial infarction patients, can go for a heart block. Okay, and atrial myxoma, yes, can lead to suddenly decreasing flow between the left atrium to left ventricle, because atrial myxoma originates in the intra-atrial septum, can obstruct the mitral orifice. Okay, and that can lead to decrease in blood supply and can lead to syncope. Pericardial effusion tamponade also can cause syncope because the inflow into the right side of the heart will be affected. So then the left ventricular inflow will also be affected, because only if the blood is received by the right ventricle, the blood can be put into the pulmonary circulation for purification, can be received in the left ventricle and be pumped forwards. But in patients with pericardial effusion, massive pericardial effusion and tamponade, the inflow, the supply into the RV itself is impaired. Okay, so there will not be good amount of blood to be pumped from the RV to the LV and then from the LV to the systemic circulation, so that can cause syncope. The most important differential diagnosis for a syncope will be a seizure. Okay, so how will you differentiate? Is there any immediate precipitating factors? You have to ask. Usually there will be nothing. Whereas syncope, there can be emotional stress, Valsalva, orthostatic hypotension, cardiac ectopics, okay, etiologies. And premonitory symptoms, sometimes there can be aura. Here there is nothing, especially diaphoresis or tunneling of vision. Why tunneling of vision? Retina is very sensitive to the hypoxia. Okay, so when the oxygen supply is impaired, that can lead to, when the blood flow is impaired, that can lead to tunneling of vision. Okay, suddenly some blackening of the vision. Okay, and posterior onset is usually variable and usually erect, suddenly gets up from the bed. Okay, and transition to unconsciousness is immediate, it gradual over seconds, and duration of unconsciousness minutes, it is seconds, and duration of tonic or clonic moments, it is more 30 to 60 seconds, whereas here it is never more than 15 seconds. Remember that involuntary movements can also occur in syncope, but it lasts very few seconds. Okay, tongue bite, yes, can be there in both also, but mostly in seizure. Urinary incontinence can also be there in both. Frothing is most likely to be seen in seizure. Okay, these are the classical differentiate points which can help you to differentiate between seizure and syncope. Coming to the next most important history, pedal edema. You can ask history, like instead of pedal edema, you can ask ankle swelling. So, is there any bilateral ankle swelling? Okay, so once again, DOPEA, your duration, onset, progression, exacerbating or relieving factors and associated factors. And tell me, what is anasarca? Okay, what is anasarca? What is anasarca? So anasarca is gross generalized edema, which can involve your hands, your legs, okay, everything. Okay, anasarca is gross generalized edema. Okay, so ascites means accumulation of fluid, excess fluid in the peritoneal cavity, and hydrothorax is fluid in your pleural cavity. Okay, so what are the mechanisms of pedal edema? Tell me, there are three important mechanisms of pedal edema. Yes, what are the three important mechanisms for pedal edema? Yes, number one is your increased hydrostatic pressure. Okay, number two is your decreased oncotic pressure. Okay, oncotic pressure is contributed by your what? Albumin. Okay, so decreased albumin can cause edema. Number three is increased capillary permeability. Okay, so this can be caused by drugs, especially calcium channel blocker, sometimes NSAIDs can cause edema. Okay, so increased hydrostatic pressure, decreased oncotic pressure, or increased capillary permeability. So these are the causes of edema. Okay, so now tell me what are the causes of pedal edema? It can be unilateral or bilateral, and pitting or non-pitting. Okay, so DVT, soft tissue infection, trauma, immobility, especially hemiplegia, can cause unilateral pedal edema, whereas bilateral is classically seen in heart failure, chronic venous insufficiency, hypoproteinemia, lymphatic obstruction, drugs, and thiamine deficiency, especially wet beriberi. There are two entities, dry beriberi and wet beriberi. Okay, your wet beriberi will involve the heart and heart failure manifestations, which causes a bilateral pedal edema. Okay, what are the causes of non-pitting edema? Two important causes you should remember. Okay, one is your filariasis, another is your myxedema. Myxedema occurs in hypothyroidism. Okay, so these are the two important causes for non-pitting edema. Okay, so these are the causes for non-pitting edema. Alright, yes. So next important symptom, which is not classical of cardiovascular history, but should be asked, is your cough with expectoration. Duration, onset, quantity, order, these are all routinely asked. Okay, postural or relieving factors, and nocturnal cough. See, The same as orthopnea. When a patient is lying down, the interstitial fluid will enter the vascular compartment and will cause dyspnea. That is called your orthopnea. Okay, dyspnea on lying down. Similarly, when the patient is has lying down flat, it can irritate the alveoli and cause cough as well. Okay, so nocturnal cough can also occur in a patient with failure, and cough on lying down can also occur with your failure patients. Okay, so postural factors or living factors. When the patient is sitting, you'll be all right, but when patient lies down, there will be coughing. Okay, so these are the points in favor of a cardiovascular etiology. Okay, and blood and coughing can occur in cardiovascular etiology as well in mitral stenosis. It can due to pulmonary apoplexy. Pulmonary apoplexy. Okay, dilated veins, pulmonary veins can rupture and that can lead to your hemoptysis as well in cardiology. Okay, so and one another cause of cough in your cardiovascular disease is your AC inhibitor induced cough. Okay, AC inhibitor induced cough due to bradykinin. Okay, so what is massive hemoptysis? According to your Harrison's, it is your more than 400 ml in 24 hours. More than 400 ml in 24 hours. Okay, right. So negative history, these are the history issues you should ask and rule out the possible etiology. Pedal edema, abdomen distension, dyspepsia and right hypochondrial pain. These are all suggesting a right heart failure symptoms. Okay, so basically raised JVP, hepatomegaly, ascites and pedal edema. Okay, whereas voice change, dysphagia, oliguria can suggest a left-sided disease. Voice change, because especially in mitral stenosis, the left atrium will be big, that can compress the recurrent laryngeal nerve, can lead to hoarseness of voice. Okay, that is also called as Ortner's syndrome. ORTNERS. Okay, ORTNERS. Ortner's syndrome. Okay, so right heart failure, your pedal edema, because of the congestion, abdomen distension can occur. Yes, ascites can occur because of high history of dyspepsia, because there will be venous congestion, so the absorption will be impaired, the food absorption will be impaired, and then right hypochondrial pain because of the tender painful hepatomegaly and pulsatile liver, tender pulsatile liver. Okay, the classical differential diagnosis is your right heart failure. Okay, very important point. And symptoms of rheumatic fever can also be asked and ruled out. So history of fever with joint pain, history of involuntary movements, skin manifestation like nodules. Okay, so rash or nodules can also be asked. Okay, what is the rash which can occur in your rheumatic fever? Yes, erythema marginatum, right? And nodules can occur in your infective endocarditis. Okay, so these are the things which can be asked and can be ruled out. Okay, and patient with pulmonary hypertension can also have some symptoms. I just want to discuss the pulmonary hypertension symptoms. Okay, they can present with syncope. Okay, they can present with hemoptysis. They can present with chest pain. Okay, so these are the symptoms with the pulmonary hypertension patient can also present with. Okay, syncope, hemoptysis and chest pain. Okay, past history. So any history of similar episodes, any history of rheumatic fever. How to identify rheumatic fever? Usually the rheumatic fever will cause severe bone pain that the patient cannot be able to walk. Such a severe episode in their life, nobody will forget easily. So if you ask, many patient can give you that clue. If there is any severe joint pain which you are immobile, which immobilized you, then the possibility will be a rheumatic fever. History of hypertension, diabetic, ischemic heart disease, TB, sexually transmitted diseases, CKD, thyroid disorders. These are very important. Okay, so hyperthyroidism can cause atrial fibrillation, hypothyroidism can cause pericardial effusion, hypertension. Okay, so these are the clues which you can get from this. Diabetes, hypertension, these are all triggers for your ischemic heart disease. Okay, and ischemic heart disease can lead to a myocardial infarction. Okay, sexually transmitted disease, syphilis especially can cause aortic regurgitation, syphilitic AR. The aortic regurgitation can occur because of the aortic root dilatation. Okay, and history of recurrent respiratory tract infection, cyanotic spells. All these are all important questions to be asked in a congenital cyanotic heart disease. Okay, so increased blood flow to the lungs will lead to a blood culture media in the lungs. So lot of recurrent respiratory tract infection will be there. And cyanotic spells is classical of, it is also called as TET spells. Okay, can occur in TOF, that is tetralogy of Fallot. Okay, and history of chronic fever can suggest you the etiology of either atrial myxoma or infective endocarditis. Chronic fever is there. The first differential diagnosis should be an infective endocarditis in a cardiac patient, and another is an atrial myxoma. Okay. So, what are the importance of family history? You have to draw a pedigree chart if possible in a long case sheet. And history of hypertension, diabetes is important. Okay, of those you can inherit those disorders. So that is the importance of hypertension, diabetes, and coronary artery disease. Okay, especially premature coronary artery disease. When do you diagnose premature coronary artery disease? Okay, if she is a female, less than 60 years, okay, and male less than 55 years. The estrogen has a preventive role on coronary arteries, okay, and prevention of atherosclerosis as well. Okay, whereas after the menopause, the females are also prone to get a coronary artery disease. So in females, the premature coronary artery disease is defined when the age of the female is less than 60 years when she develops a coronary artery disease. Whereas in males, it is less than 55 years. Okay, personal history includes a diet, vegetarian, non-vegetarian diet, and smoking, alcohol history as well. Very, very important risk factors for developing a coronary artery disease. And treatment history, you can include whatever drugs the patient is on. Especially a patient with rheumatic heart disease will be on a penicillin prophylaxis. Once in 21 days, benzathine penicillin injection they will get. Okay, so such a treatment history can give you a clue towards the etiology. Okay, so and one more history I would like to highlight is a sudden unexpected death. Sudden unexpected death. Okay, so death in the family member. So that can tell that the patient's family is having a mutation or a arrhythmia, a lethal arrhythmia, okay, or a cardiomyopathy. Okay, these are the causes which can cause sudden unexplained death. Lethal cardiomyopathy triggering an arrhythmia can cause a sudden unexplained death. Okay, so to summarize, how will you summarize age, sex, name, personal history, family history, then positive history, whatever positive features, okay, you can tell. Then the probable system involved is cardiovascular system. This is how you summarize the history. So I hope you got an understanding about the various history which are important in cardiovascular system, right? So right from chest pain, you have the Socrates for chest pain, okay, and DOPA duration onset, progression, okay, exacerbating or living factors, okay, then associated features for all the symptoms, okay, even cough with expectoration carries some significance in your cardiovascular history, and history of rheumatic fever is very, very important, okay, and family history of CAD is important, hypertension, diabetes is important, and even CKD can cause accelerated atherosclerosis, that is also important. Finally, to come to a summary, you will write all the name. Of course, sometimes name is not possible in short case history because even name is not possible in the short case. So that is different because if it is a long case, you will summarize after the history taking. So that includes your name, age, sex, personal history, family, so whatever positive history she is having and whatever risk factors you will highlight. For example, Mr. Armugam, a 60-year-old gentleman, basically a chronic smoker and diabetic for the past 10 years. Okay, and presented with complaints of chest pain on exertion for 1 month duration associated with dyspnea. Okay, the probable system involved is cardiovascular system. This is how your summary should be for a long case in cardiovascular system. So basically important thing is to elicit a proper history. Myocardial infarction can mimic an acute abdomen. Okay, so take a proper history that will help you to arrive at a diagnosis. Have always differentials. Okay, pain above umbilicus can be due to cardiac etiology. Pain below umbilicus will always be a surgical etiology. This is a quote which has been discussed by senior professors. Okay, so always have a differential. Don't think that right-sided shoulder pain cannot be of cardiac etiology, because your pain in myocardial infarction or anginal pain, the most common site to be localized or radiated is your right shoulder. Okay, then both shoulders, then comes the left shoulder. We think that a cardiac chest pain will always lead to a pain in the left shoulder than to a right shoulder. It is not so. Okay, in the evidence-based medicine states that the most common site to be radiated for an anginal chest pain is your right shoulder, then it can radiate to the both shoulders, or then it can radiate to the left shoulder around. Okay, it can radiate to the back, jaw. Okay, there are a lot of manifestations. Okay, so always investigation wise, the most important investigation to be done in a cardiovascular patient is an ECG, electrocardiogram. Okay, then you can go for a chest X-ray and echocardiography, which can tell you the probable diagnosis. Okay, of course, the further intervention based investigation is a coronary angiogram, and you have a non-invasive investigation which can tell you the etiology, which is your cardiac MRI. Okay, so these are the various imaging things which are available for confirming, but before confirming you should arrive at a probable differential diagnosis for that patient. Okay, and that we can get only with the help of a proper history taking. So with this we have come to the end of this module. Okay, thank you one and all. And for any doubts or feedback, you can definitely send a mail to me or a WhatsApp. Alright, so thank you so much.